Hey, this is Bwack. We're out in Philly today at the Electric Factory, and I'm here to talk to you guys about some of the loops and electronics that we use live. Loops to us are basically any of the electronic elements in our music that were programmed in the studio, and we're not going to be performing that stuff live because it's like drum machines or synthesizers and pads that sit more back in the song. Some examples are like, say, Everything Glorious has a lot of beats, synths, pads, strings, that sort of stuff that's really back in the mix and just kind of lays behind the band live. We typically play to either a sequence or a loop that I either bring in and out during the song, or maybe I start at the beginning of the song and we just play to the sequence. Again, a lot of this stuff was made in the studio in the pre-production process before we even tracked all the instruments. Sometimes I'm coming up with beat ideas and I end up falling on something in the drum machine that I think sounds cool, and it ends up staying in the recording just because it really complements what I end up doing later on the drum set. Other times we're actually looking for something live that'll just help beef up the song, kind of make it sound better, sound a little fuller. Like, say, a good example, a long time ago we were looking to just add some kind of static distorted element behind the song, Every Move I Make. We haven't played that song in years, but it's one of the first songs that we actually brought loops into. The funny thing is, that original loop was one of the first ones we ever made, and it's kind of a funny process. We actually used David's old Korg M1 keyboard to make a beat. I went and grabbed Jack's pedal board, ran it through his pedal board, used some distortion. Dave actually came out of his office that day at the church to help me. He actually did the wah pedal, and we made this kind of funny loop that just has some wah, distorted drum beat kind of thing, but it was all actually done real time and recorded directly into the old hardware sampler we used. So here's kind of a basic look at my electronic setup. I used to use a hardware sampler, and it's basically on-off. You have 8 buttons, each button is a loop. You press the button, it starts, you press the button again, it stops. And that's great. It was perfect for us because it was flawless. It would never really make its own mistakes. If we hit it wrong, well, that was our fault, but it performed flawlessly. But now we're kind of at a point where we need a little more ability to ebb and flow. So I went to a computer-based sampler. I'm using a program called Ableton Live that basically lets me list out all my songs, and every sample I have, I can tie into a click. I'm using a PowerMate here. I can scroll through all my loops. I'm kind of using Ableton in a different way than it was intended. It was intended to have the ability to make music kind of happen on the fly. You could set up a whole lot of clips and you could just go through them in any way you wanted, and you can launch many different ways using either the keyboard or a MIDI input device. I'm basically just making a list of songs in the set list, and as the night progresses I can scroll through. I can start a song, I can end it. I've got a play and stop button here. Every sample can be tied into a click, or it can be running just by itself, or it can even be multi-track where I've got maybe all the beats and everything on one side, a click on another side, and then even another track that would have just like strings and pads or maybe some synth stuff. I've kind of got it in here as a list that I can scroll through. All the actual samples are housed on a little thumb drive, and the reason I'm doing that is because it's very low latency. If I was using the hard drive in the computer to house all the samples, every time I want to launch a sample, the actual drive would have to spin to that location, which takes milliseconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're actually performing live, you want instantaneous ability to get to those samples. That's another reason we used to use the hardware sample, because it's all flash-based. So I'm using a thumb drive, which you can get upwards of like 2, 3, 4 gigs now. I'm using about a gig's worth of memory to house all the samples we use in a night. We probably use loops on about 80% of our songs. Click on most. Sometimes I'm playing to just the loop, sometimes I'm playing to click and loop. One of the other really nice features of live is that I can start a click and maybe halfway through the song bring the actual loop in over that click. That's actually what I'm using this Roland SPDS for. It's a MIDI input device into live. I've got basically a play and a stop button, and then I've also got the ability to move back and forth. Well, in live, setting up my list, sometimes I'll hit play to just start a click, we can start the song, we can get all the way through the intro and the first verse, and then maybe in the chorus is when I want to bring the loop in. I hit play again, and it basically jumps to the next loop in the sequence. I can back up if I need to, but usually we just run through the sequence as we go. One of the more crucial aspects of all this is monitoring. I need to be able to hear what's going on at all times. I use in-ears that are basically like headphones, but they're buried deep in your ear and you can hear really well everything that's going on. I monitor all that through a Roland Edirol FA101 interface. It's basically an interface that's Firewire, plugs into my computer, and allows me to both mix down a lot of different signals coming from our audio guy, but also all the loops that I'm using, the click, and then also send those loops and that click back to the audio guy so he can send them to the band. It's got about 8 inputs and outputs on the back, another 2 on the front that I can actually plug my mix into from the audio guy. One of the things that's great about this interface is it allows me to mix down everything that I'm getting from both the audio guy and from Hogan's Electronics and mix it all into my ears so that I can hear what's going on. At the same time though, in Ableton, I can take all of the loops and the click and send them out individually to the front of house so that they can be mixed in and sent back to the band for their monitor mixes. One of the last things I have here is actually an old modified Oxygen 8 keyboard. It's an M-Audio keyboard that I actually cut the keys off, and I'm just using the knobs and faders to basically allow me to turn clicks and loops on or off for the rest of the band, or I can control how much I have of each of those items. It's a USB device, plugs right into the computer, and just basically allows me to mix live what I need to mix for the band.